Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Podcast, where our mission is to inspire, impact, and influence other immigrant entrepreneurs to follow their dreams and create the future they want. My guest today is the president of Earnest Inc., Nathan Turner. Welcome to the show, Nathan.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Nathan, I've prepared a few questions, done some research on you.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was pretty surprised about is that you're a Canadian guy doing business in the US.
Yes.
Which is not a an exception, or let's say something very unusual. But you're doing, basically, from what I'm understanding, you're doing 100% of your business in the US. Is that
That's
correct?
right. Yeah, that's right. Everything I do is in the US. I just live in Canada.
Okay. I'm really excited to hear about that and the challenges and the obstacles you had to overcome doing business in a different country. Obviously, you're not a typical immigrant, having immigrated to the US, but you're doing business almost as an immigrant. So,
Right.
before we get into what you do exactly and how you got into what you're doing, I'm seeing that you have also experience in franchising. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That was my first real business. I'd kind of done a few things before that, but my first real business was a Curves franchise. So it was a gym for women that was popular back in the early 2000s.
Okay. And you had the franchise of that gym?
Yeah, so we had we opened our first one in 2004, my wife and I, and then it was going well enough. We thought that was going to be our life, and so we opened a second location a year later, and it was really good for a few years, and then it really wasn't.
Why it wasn't after a few years?
As we got into 2007, 2008, as the economy started to shift, when people get nervous about their finances, one of the first things they cut is their gym membership. So that it ushered in a huge decline that we had to work with and deal with, and it was tough, but you get through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, so you're working with again. We will soon talk about what you do, but you're working with accredited investors.
Right.
Someone might know what an accredited investor is. So can you please explain about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So accredited investor means it's somebody who makes at least $200,000 a year by themselves with their spouse partner, about $300,000 a year, or you have $1 million net worth. And it can be either one of those. Those are the most common requirements for that accreditation status. It's not a rule that I came up with. That's actually a US government rule. There's been talk about it changing, but there's been talk about that changing for years. So I don't anticipate anything being different. But that's essentially what that is, just making sure that you have enough income to warrant investing in what they term higher risk. I don't believe this is high risk at all, but according to the powers that be, that's the definition.
Right. And then what do you get? Do you get a certification? Hey, I'm now accredited investor.
Not even. The way that we verify that is before you come on, and as an investor, I get a letter from, typically it's from your accountant, just certifying that yes, you meet the qualifications, you meet the income requirement to be an accredited investor.
Gotcha. By the way, something just came up to my mind. Let me get this out of the way. Whatever we're talking here, for the listeners or the viewers, whatever we're talking about here is what Nathan does and what got him where he is none of any advisory or these sorts of things. So we're not giving financial advice or anything like that. So we're just talking about what Nathan does, and I'm wondering what he does. That's what we're sharing with our audience. So, that disclaimer is done. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So you're the Canadian mortgage note guy.
Right.
Tell us about that. What does that mean?
What that means is, well, let me back up for a second. So as I was still doing the curves. Right near the end of that, I started doing some fix and flip property investing, where we buy a house, fix it up, and then resell it.
In the US?
In Canada, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was near the end of that time in 2007, 2008, where I got stuck with one property and I wasn't able to sell it. So I did what you're supposed to do, I think, or what I thought at the time was I rented out the house. So I became a landlord, and I discovered very quickly that I liked the cash flow from having a renter in my home, but I didn't like anything else about it. It was very difficult to manage. I had to fly out. It was on the other side of the country, so I had to fly out every time somebody moved out to go and repaint the house or fix whatever needed fixing. I couldn't find anybody local to do that for me, and it was more economical to go out and do it myself. So it was a lot of time, a lot of energy. I finally did find a property manager who was willing to take on one property. He was terrible. we had to call him every month to see if he was going to make a payment to us from what he received. And oh yeah, sure, yeah, I just have to do some accounting and then I'll send it over. Like it was just a huge headache, and I didn't really understand why people become landlords. So fast forward just a little bit, I got introduced into this note investing, where instead of owning the property and then renting it out, I'm actually just buying the mortgage that's attached to the property. So I'm not actually buying the house at all. I'm just buying the financing. So if somebody goes to buy a house, they get a loan from the bank, and that creates a mortgage. It's an IOU that says, I promise to pay the bank back at this percent over this many years.
Sorry to interrupt you, can you make a real example based on numbers so people can process it a bit better, and I can also process it better?
Sure, yeah. So let's just go with easy numbers. Let's say it's unrealistic, but let's just say for easy numbers, you bought a house for $100,000. You did a 10% down payment, so that's $10,000. The balance on the loan is now $90,000. So the bank gives you a mortgage. They've agreed to loan you $90,000 that you're going to pay over the course of 30 years at whatever today's interest rate, 7%, and payment amount of, call it $500. That's probably not the right math, but close enough. I then step in and say, bank manager person, I will buy that loan from you. I typically buy it at a discount, and they will sell it to me rather than the bank accepting payments. Now I'm accepting payments. So that $500 now goes to me instead of to the bank, and I become the beneficiary of that. So I haven't bought the property. I've just bought the right to receive payments with the property as the collateral.
Okay. A couple of questions, of course. Why would the bank sell the note to you?
When I first got started, the major problem was we had just gotten into a major recession. So the loans that I was purchasing when I first started were all defaulted, where people were not making any payments at all. So the banks were in a real problem. They needed to get rid of these loans so that they could get the money back and then re-loan that money out to somebody else who would make payments. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of these. So typically what happened is the banks would sell large pools of loans, like $100 million worth of loans, to a larger hedge fund. That hedge fund would then sell off whatever didn't fit their box. If it was in a certain state, or if it was, under a certain number or whatever, they had their own criteria. They would sell anything that didn't fit whatever they wanted. That's what I would buy. So that's why they sold those in the first place. Today, the economy is in much better shape. There are far fewer delinquencies, far fewer defaults. So today I'm actually shifted where I'm buying performing notes, where people are making regular payments. And those tend to be seller finance notes. So that's where maybe an individual, they've acquired a second property. They don't want to rent it out because it's a lot of work and it's a big headache. So they sell it on terms, and they've created a note. And again, that same kind of, they've created a mortgage that now the person living in the home is making payments. They're the one on title of the property, and they're just making payments on a monthly basis. And then that individual says, you know what, this is great, but I don't actually want to hang on to this, or maybe I've got another investment I want to invest into, or I want to send my kid to college or go on holidays, whatever it is, they'll sell that note to somebody like me.
Mm-hmm. So what happens if you, I mean, you own the notes, but you do not own the property, right?
Right.
What is the benefit of owning the note but not owning the property, and what is the downside of it?
Yeah. So the benefit is I don't own the property, which means I'm not responsible for the property. So with a rental, you've always got to set money aside for the next time you have to replace the roof, or something happens to the house, or, you got to replace the toilet. Who knows? All kinds of different things happen with houses that you have to repair. When I'm the note holder, I don't own the property. So all of that maintenance is not my problem. Banks don't fix roofs. Banks don't replace toilets. It's just not what a bank does. The downside is that because I don't own the property, I don't get the appreciation of that house over time. So it is a bit of a trade-off. Personally, I've done both. I prefer this one because maybe I'm lazy. I don't know, but I would rather not take care of the property and just collect the monthly payments. For me, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. So, and what is it, let's say you collect the payments, but you're also paying off the notes. I mean, let's say you buy, going back to our previous example, you're buying a note that is worth $90,000. Let's say you're buying it for $80,000, probably less, but let's say for $80,000. Now you're collecting payments, but you still have this $80,000 to amortize.
Right. So the $80,000 will be cash. So that's cash that either maybe I borrowed money from an investor, or it's just cash that I have saved up and have on hand. If it's cash that I have of my own, there's nobody else to pay. I just collect the payments. And because that's amortized over time, that's a great point. At $500 a month at 7% interest rate over the course of 25, 30 years, it's far more than $80,000. It's we can put it into a calculator, but it's going to be something like $200,000 because you're paying principal and interest with each payment. So the same thing goes with if I borrowed the money. I actually have a fund where I have investors put money into the fund. We pay an 8% annual return to the investor. The notes that I'm buying at a minimum 12% yield. So there's the gap there. I get to make money on whatever's over and above that 8%.
Okay. And the 8% is guaranteed? Again, is not financial advice, guys. I'm just asking Nathan out of own interest. Is that guaranteed, or how do you do that?
It's my attorney says I'm not allowed to use the word guarantee.
Right.
But I can tell you we pay 8%. And I can tell you that confidently because we're always buying at a minimum 12. So there's always room there. Again, I got to be careful with the words because of my attorney, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, no, I can't guarantee it, but I hopefully you can see where it's coming from, and it's very manageable.
Okay. Now, some people might have, think that hey, this is too good to be true. Tell us about the challenges that you face.
Absolutely. Actually, today I'm preparing to give a talk session on it's called Why Boring is Better, and why I'm looking more at performing loans these days. So let's say the real risks are somebody stops paying and then I end up owning the property. As I've gone through different scenarios over time, to me, I don't want to own the property. The further I've gone along, the more I don't want to own the property, because that's where the surprises come in. We end up taking back a property. Most of the time, there's no issue. I take back the property. We end up selling it back out to typically a local investor or something like that. And it's usually there's no issue, but every once in a while we take back one of these properties and we find out that the people living in the house did not take very good care of it. And in some cases, really bad care where it's broken this and broken that, mold in the basement, and all kinds of problems can come up. And like I say, it doesn't happen that often, but I would just rather not deal with it. I would rather just collect on those notes. So a couple of things we can do is if the person stops paying, almost always, if we can get into a conversation, if they will actually answer the phone when I call and say, hi, hey, it's me. I see you're not making payments. How can we fix this? And sometimes it's very often it's a temporary thing. They've lost a job and now they're going back to get another job, something like that. Or they've just gone through a divorce or something like that. There's been some kind of life event that's come up and gotten in the way. Most of the time, those life events are temporary, where they can get back on track. And because I'm not a bank, I can be far more flexible. So we say, okay, if you need 2 months to get back on track, great. Take 2 months. At the end of that 2 months, we will pick up and either pick back up on the same payment schedule or we'll make adjustments. If their new job doesn't pay as well, okay, if your old payment was $800 and that's no longer realistic, could you do $600? And we can adjust and modify and make it something doable. I would far rather do that than go through the process. I don't want to kick people out of their houses. That's not fun. That's not nice. It's just not a good thing.
Have you done it?
I do have that as an option. I have. It's most of the time it's when they don't answer the phone, where they don't get into some kind of conversation. It is rare, but maybe, I don't know, 5% of the time we end up having to actually foreclose on a person. Most of the time if we're foreclosing, it's a life event that's non-reversible, meaning they died. So somebody died and then there's no longer somebody there to make payments. In that case, yes, we'll go ahead and foreclose, take back the property and then resell it.
Interesting. Okay. Where do you find the deals? Where do you get business from?
That's the real secret sauce. That's it comes with a lot of networking, a lot of just relationships. If you talk to anybody in this business, they'll tell you it's all about relationships. So one thing that I've done to help foster more relationships is a couple of years ago, my wife and I was approached, and then my wife has always been my business partner. So I was approached about taking over a conference that had been established already, all about note investing. And my first thought was, more networking? Absolutely, I'm in. Does it make money? As long as it pays for itself, that's all I care about. Does it pay for itself? Yes. Okay, great, I'm in. And so we took that over. And so now we run that. It's called the Diversified Mortgage Expo. Actually, our next one's coming up in May in Nashville, May 2nd and 3rd. And it's just anybody and everybody who's either interested in notes or has been already note investing for years. So it's fascinating. We'll do a little survey, kind of impromptu survey, and we have just as many brand new people as we have really seasoned, people with multi-million-dollar funds in attendance. So that's really interesting to see. So it's a great place for people to come together. I put an extra concentration on inviting people who have notes to sell to come, because we've got a room full of note investors, people that want to buy your notes. So a great place for us all to get together and share and network.
Interesting. So I have done a few things in my life. One of them was being a land investor. I bought and sold land.
Okay.
Vacant land. So, and I remember there was a guy, because when you're buying and selling land, usually there is no bank involved. Either you're putting up your own money or you have friends, family, partners, investors that you work with. So most of the time it's your own money or someone close to you's money involved, right? Sometimes and usually you want to turn it around if it's not something that you want to hold on into for a long time as a long-term investment. You just want to buy, sell it, and make some profit.
Yeah.
I remember there was a guy I don't remember his name. He was all about buying notes.
Yes.
He was like, "Hey guys, if you can't sell your property, I will buy the notes." And obviously, he was buying them at a discount, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is what you're doing only homes, and is it a specific niche of homes, kind of homes that you're investing in, or is it anything and everything in real estate?
Yeah, great question. And everybody kind of has their own niche within note investing. So land is a big one. There's people that love it. They don't want anything but land notes. Um, I'm not one of those guys.
Right.
I appreciate the land idea. I can't get my head around it. I'm too far away and I don't know the areas well enough. So
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I'm only buying notes on single family houses with balances under $250,000. So
Mm-hmm.
most of the notes I buy tend to be on the eastern half of the country. So from
I see.
Texas up to Michigan and everything in between. Um,
Florida.
I do buy Florida. Yep. Florida, Carolinas, Tennessee, Alabama, Ohio, Michigan, anything and everything. The only place that I kind of tend to stay away from is New England. So New York, New
Mhm.
Jersey, Maryland, they've got really weird foreclosure laws. So if and when we end up doing a foreclosure, they're weird. They just have their own
Mhm.
way of doing it, and it's very lengthy and very time consuming and expensive. So I tend to stay away from that area. But otherwise, every once in a while, something pops up in my price range in Arizona or Colorado or Nevada, but they're more rare. But we tend
Mhm.
to be on the eastern half.
When you're buying these notes, do you do due diligence like someone who is buying a home, or do you know based on your experience, hey, this home in this area is worth that much per square feet, and I'm just going to buy the note without seeing it if it's at this and this percentage based on my due diligence or experience?
Yeah, great question. So the house is definitely part of the due diligence process. Um, and I do like each individual note that I buy, I'm always doing research on whatever the property is behind it. And the reason is it has come up in the past where I've done, some internet research. I've looked on Google and Zillow, Redfin, and I can pretty well get to a good understanding of what the property is. And then I will send out a local realtor. And it has happened in the past where I send out the local realtor and the house is no longer there, where the house is
Mm,
burned down or it's been destroyed by the city or whatever. And so definitely we make sure that we get a local person out there. There's only so much I can see online.
I
So
see.
the property is for sure a big part of that. The due diligence. We'll look at title to see what's on the title report, make sure that that is appropriate, that it's clean. There's no, outstanding IRS liens or something like that attached to the property. And then I'm looking at the numbers of the note. So what's the interest rate? What's the payment amount? What's the term? Those are kind of everything goes into that due diligence.
I see. So, are you dealing with banks or organizations that banks have sold to?
Usually organizations the banks have sold to.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I imagine this to be very capital intensive business. Is that the
It's
case? And do
it's
you
cash
never run out of capital?
Right. Yeah, it's a cash only business. So I can't go to a bank to get a loan to buy
Mm-hmm.
loans. They
Mm-hmm.
don't like that. So that's why we put together the fund looking for investors and we're always raising capital so we can go and buy more loans.
I see. And but when you got started, how did you get started? Did you had a couple of millions sitting on the bank and you were like, hey, let's do something with it? What was it like?
No, I wish. No, it was very much friends and family at the very beginning. I had my very first real experience with it was kind of lucked out where I run into a group of investors who had bought a bunch of properties, mostly centered in the Midwest. They bought in April of 2007, so right at the very peak of the market. And I was brought in fall of 2008 when everything had fallen apart. And they realized that they had way overpaid on these properties. So there are 60 properties, mostly centered in the Midwest. And it was my old partner and I, and our task was to divest of these properties the best way we could, knowing that they were totally underwater. Like they were worth much less than what they had bought them for. So we had kind of thought we'd invented seller financing, where we started selling these houses on terms and creating notes. And then as I kind of got into that world and discovered that there was a much bigger group of people that were already involved in buying notes. And so that was kind of my introduction. And I started going to a couple of conferences that existed at the time, and just started networking and meeting people and learning as we went. And that was my introduction to it. So it was very organic, very, grassroots kind of thing. We just kind of grew with the business. It was really fun.
Love it, man. I love that. So if I at the end of this call, after the call, today, tomorrow, in a year, give you a call and I'm Nathan, I got some cash and don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Should I invest it with you? And you're like, yeah, let's do it. Am I looking at a minimum time frame that you're like, hey, if you're investing with me, at least keep it, let me keep it for that long so it makes sense for both of us? Is there anything like this or no?
No, actually. So in my fund, we leave it open-ended. So if you want to be in for 6 months and then take your money out, that's fine. If you want to leave it there and have it compound for 10 years, great. The only thing I would say is that in the fund, if you're looking to take the money out, all the money is in the notes. So it may take, a month, maybe 2, for me to be able to sell the note to get your capital back out. So it's fairly liquid, but it can take, a month or 2 to get your capital out.
Gotcha. That's awesome, man. Learned so much about notes and investing. And
It's for your audience, I mean, I'm in Canada. You can do all of this remotely. So if you're living somewhere outside of the United States, I'm living proof you can absolutely do this from anywhere.
How competitive is that niche?
A little bit. Like at my conference, we have about 300 people that come to the conference. I would say at least half of those are, regularly active investors where they do this on a regular basis. But there's lots of notes out there, and you can find them, again, through a lot of networking. Find them just through people on Facebook, going to different real estate investing meetings to see who's there. A lot of the time, the people that have created these notes don't know that they can sell them. They don't know that there's an outlet there. So they're happy to meet people like me, and just as an option. Maybe they want to hang on to it for now, but maybe in a year from now, they need the cash for some reason.
That's awesome, man. I had one question that I forgot. So where do people find you? Maybe as you're speaking, the question will come back to me.
Sure. The best way to get in touch with me is through my website, earnestinvesting.com. And there's information there about our fund. There's a link over to our conference if that's of any interest. But that's a great place to get some more information and to get in touch with me.
Awesome, Nathan. Question is not back, but I respect your time. And thank you so much for coming on. We will definitely link you up in the show notes. And if somebody would want to reach out to you, learn more about it, I did learn a lot. Yeah, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you. And God bless and much success to you.
Great. Thank you so much.